Hello and welcome to Property Mastermind Podcast, episode 139. Today we are talking, are all town planners created equally? Bob and I will sort of pull apart the role of the town planner, what they do, the things you need to know and the things to look out for, and the things that can really help you when it comes to town planners. So let's jump on into episode 139. Hello, welcome to episode 139. Oh, different format today. Bob and I are in different locations. Hey, Bob, how are you?
Hey, pretty good where I am.
That's good. I can hear a bit of static on that mic. Hopefully it's okay and we're not going to deafen the people listening. But anyway, let's give away the book because this week, Property Millionaires Exposed is going to Jennifer Gray. Jennifer, I'll be posting this out to you. I had a nice chat with Jennifer this week. But remember to head over to chapter 121. And that's all about property development. And there are lots of other fantastic property strategies in here. So thank you for your call, Jennifer. And that book's on its way to you. So, Bob, what's your tip for the week?
Well, my tip for the week is keep away from sick people.
Why do you say that?
We've had a couple of people in the family with weird little viruses, and I think play it safe. It's not worth it. That's my tip for the week, and that's what I'm doing. I'm being kind on the phone. I'm not visiting them with flowers.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I'm a bit like that myself. So we're going to shed some light on this topic of town planners, Bob. And I'm going to start with, could you just start us off by explaining what exactly town planners do? Council town planners and private town planners. What is it that they get up to, Bob?
Yeah, well, you're quite right. There's typically two types if you can divide them. There's planners or town planners who work for the authorities, usually councils, and we have quite a bit of interaction with those. There's also private town planners in private practice, and they're the planners that we use on our projects. So in a simple form, most developments have to comply with a planning scheme. There has to be some order as to how developments happen and how they roll out. Otherwise, it'd be total chaos. Might be good for developers. Well, no, probably not. We probably need some rules, although I think there's too many. But in terms of what you can do on certain parcels of land and what you can't do, alternatively, is dictated by a planning scheme. And so the town planner's role is to help us as developers navigate those planning schemes. And it's not always black and white. Some planning schemes are purposefully left a little bit vague to give councils a little bit of latitude, for better or for worse. And so it's not just prescriptive, and town planners can help us with that. They can even steer us in the direction if we don't fully comply with a plan, what's our likelihood of being able to deviate and get what we want. So as developers, of course, we have a preconceived idea of what it is we want to develop. That idea doesn't always match 100% with the planning scheme. And so the town planner's role isn't necessarily to box us in and make us conform. In some cases, it's, can we skirt around the edges a little? And I'm looking at this from the developer's point of view, of course, what can we get away with, or what are we likely to be able to get away with a little bit outside of the plan? And so that's a developer's description of what a town planner is and what they do. But they're quite a valuable member of our team, particularly on that front end, because when we buy a site and we have an idea of what we want to do, all our feasibility, all our numbers are based on achieving that, and it's the town planner's role to make sure that we achieve what we want to achieve, assuming our expectations are realistic, of course, in the first place. But during our due diligence period, we're going to have quite a bit of interaction with the town planner anyway. So that's a developer's viewpoint.
Sorry, I was interesting you brought up there that it can be a loose plan with the council. So, and you said that so it can almost be is that sort of for a negotiation reasons or because they know that it could change over time? What's the reason that there is a sort of
I,
a you use the
well,
word vague plan scheme in some cases? What's that reason?
I think on the negative side, remember I've always got my developer's hat on here. It can give them a little bit of added latitude to say no if something was absolutely 100% prescriptive, then that's the way you have to do it. And they're obliged as well as the developer to conform. So when it's in some cases a little bit vague, it gives them latitude maybe to say no, but it gives us as developers an opportunity to say, well, look, this is what we would like, and for a very good reason. It gives us the opportunity to argue it. Some things are locked in stone, no, but councils, they're funny. Not every council's the same. I think there's something like 630 councils in the whole of Australia. No two are absolutely identical. And we know that. I mean, we've got some councils that might be, for instance, very green, some councils less so. Some councils could be in what we call anti-development, and some are pro-development. And that doesn't always remain the same forever, because often attitudes within council are driven by the elected members, not just the permanent employees. So if you think of a council, there's permanent employees who, work there all the time. That might even be their career. Some of them are town planners, there's possibly engineers, could even be architects, depending on the size of the council. But then you've got elected members. Now, mayors are elected, aldermen or alder persons, I don't know, whatever the right thing is, they're elected maybe for 3 years. And so they can drive policy because they're the political side of a council, and they can drive policy and steer the permanent employees in a certain direction. And you see that occasionally. I had a run-in once with an elected member who was quite anti-development, just in her electorate, which probably took in 3 or 4 suburbs. The council itself wasn't anti-development; she was, and it was always a bit of a job to get around her because she was always trying to influence the permanent employees who, would like to put their back up, but there's this internal conflict between elected members and permanent sometimes. And I don't always agree, so it's a bit of a weird system inside councils.
Oh, that's so interesting, Bob. What about do town planners all do the same thing, or do they have their specialties? Do some specialise in different types of developments, or even other things within town planning? How does that work?
Oh yeah, look, there are different types of planners. Um, there's strategic town planners who often work for governments. It doesn't have to be council, it can even be state governments. They sort of form long-term policy on strategically speaking, in terms of what large parcels of land might be next to be developed, and then they have to look at, how we're getting infrastructure out there. They're sort of strategic town planners. As developers, we really never get to talk to them. But the type of town planner we get to talk to is obviously the ones in council, but often we don't necessarily get to talk to them. We see the results because it might be our town planner. Our town planner is, if you like, the front person or the middle person between us as developers and the council. And so on our behalf, they'd be submitting applications, they'd be fielding questions, they'd be negotiating, and in some cases, perhaps even arguing with council about certain matters that they feel they're correct on and council isn't necessarily correct on.
Mm.
And I just had a situation like that on a large project we're doing where council were trying to make us do something that we didn't necessarily want to do, and they had no legal right to ask us to do it. And so we went to the point of getting a very high-level property lawyer that we know in Sydney who specialises in the type of development that we do to write a letter to council and basically put them in their place in terms of what they could or could not do, what they could ask us to do and not ask us to do. I did that lightly because you don't go looking for fights with council, although sometimes they'll throw a punch and you have to counter, which was what that was about. And so, you're always making up your mind. Do you comply and just sort of roll over and let them have their way? But in this case, it didn't suit us to do that, and we took a legal approach because they were absolutely wrong, and they knew they didn't have the power to ask what they were asking. So
What was the
at
response
this
to
time we
that, Bob?
stood them up. Well, the the response was very little. They actually had to get an opinion because once we hit them with a legal letter, they're bound to contact their lawyers and seek advice. And their lawyers confirmed the advice that we had. So at least even if they didn't know they were wrong, they were told by their lawyers they were wrong. And so they backed off. But, that's an example of even councils don't always follow their own rules. There's always a bit of pushing going back, which is why a good town planner in your team is quite important. And even if it gets beyond that, then it can become a legal issue.
When you talk about a good town planner, and I'm sorry, there's a bit of lag my end, so every now and then I'm just jumping on top of you. I feel like you're finished, but just like every profession, Bob, their experience pays off, and so the more time somebody spent working in an industry often can mean they're better, and sometimes newer people are better at things. I think there's a tipping point. For instance, property development, you having over 40 years experience, that just is, it's just so valuable. You're like a resource. Is that a similar thing with town planners? Or I suppose I'm asking, does experience matter when you're looking at a town planner, or does it not really matter? How do you feel about that, or what's your opinion? I don't
I
know. Where are we
do.
going here?
Yeah, well, I think experience matters because development applications aren't always exactly the same. Even the same, you could have a duplex and another duplex in the same council, and there's different town planning issues to deal with on those two. They're not always identical. And then, of course, you can go beyond just duplexes and talk about subdivisions, townhouses and apartments and everything else. So a broad range of experience, I think, is important because you get a town planner that's dealt with council over a long period of time on a whole range of different types of development. And also they probably, during that period of time, got to know the permanent employees, if you like, at town planning. They know which ones they can perhaps, push a little bit, which ones they have to be more delicate with, and how to deal with matters. I think that's important. I wouldn't appoint a town planner to help me who perhaps just came out of uni last year. He might be working for even a big town planning firm, which is great. But I always try and go for a senior person as much as I can anyway. But they're not all created equal, and even in their attitudes. I've met town planners who much prefer a fully compliant application. So a fully compliant application is one that ticks all the yes boxes. It should, complies with all the town planning, design aspects, everything, and should sail through council, although nothing much sails through council. They always like to have their little say, and some of them can take quite a while to have their say. But sometimes you're pushing the boundaries. And what I like in a town planner is it's a town planner that doesn't roll over. And I've even had town planners tell me, I don't really want to push too hard. This isn't necessarily on my applications, but obviously we see lots of town planners in our business. I don't want to push too hard on that point because I'm dealing with council every day. And I don't want to just push too hard on that point. I don't want to get into an argument about it. We're going to have to, basically, fight for that. And they just take that conciliatory, soft approach. And you've got other town planners who are prepared to take council to task. I suppose you don't want the other extreme, the sort of person who might get involved in road rage on a town planning sort of perspective. But I want a town planner who, if he really thinks we're right and we are in the right. They're prepared to argue the point with council and push them. That's the sort of town planner I want. I don't want a town planner that rolls over.
Yeah.
And that's one of the aspects I don't like about some town planners.
And when we're talking about the difference between town planners, their attitudes, their experience, does that reflect in their fees, Bob? In your experience or what you know, is there quite a blanketed amount when it comes to what town planners will charge, or do some tend to charge more than others? What would you expect to pay for a town planner?
Well, you're talking about a range of prices, I'll call it prices, quotes, whatever you like, with town planners. It doesn't vary hugely. For instance, architects, they can vary a lot. I did a little experiment once when I had a bit of time on my side. I was planning to do a 22 apartment project, and because I had a bit of time with the settlement, I spoke to 6 different architects. I knew all of them, and I got 6 sets of prices, and the variation from the, if you like, the cheapest to the most expensive for the same job, exact same job with a tight brief, was about it was nearly 3 times. It was about 250%. So that, if you like, the most expensive was about 2.5 times the least expensive. All of them were decent architects, quite capable of doing what I wanted them to do. And that's a huge variation in price as well.
Mm.
In fact, on the same project, I had a little bit of time. I had to get an acoustic report. I went to 6 acoustic engineers, and the variation was 350% for the exact same job. So, yeah, and I find the same with demolishers, 2 or 3 times different sometimes with demolishers. But with town planners and engineers to a fair degree as well, and even surveyors for that matter, they're relatively close.
Mm.
So if you go to a big town planning firm, it's a bit like a law firm. You've got a partner, and they'll have a rate, which is up there a bit. Then you'll have associates, and then you'll have varying people down the line. And so what often happens is, if it's a straightforward project, you'll get a middle of the range town planner with a middle of the range sort of
Fee?
price. It might fee, like it might run at the moment when we're recording this between $200 and $250 an hour for a town planner, mid-range town planner. A partner might be $350, but then they probably only get dragged into it, maybe never, if it's a simple one. And if it's a complex one, they might do a certain amount of work, a bit like lawyers, And so not necessarily a big range. Even in the larger firms, you don't necessarily pay a lot more. It's choosing the right town planner for the job. It's a bit like that even with architects. Like that most expensive architect I spoke about, that 22 apartment would have been the very bottom end of the job he would take on. He'd be used to doing more larger, more high-rise, 60, 70, 80 type. And so he carries a lot of overheads and staff and everything else. And he probably didn't want the job either, because it was on the bottom end of the scale. And so he gave me a price which meant he wasn't going to get the job, but we're still friends. He didn't say, I'm not interested in quoting. I knew him pretty well, so he gave me a price that I'd obviously say no to. And so that has a lot to do as well. And some of the projects we've done have been quite complex, and I've gone to larger town planning firms. Some of them even have international offices. Because of the complexity of the plan, of the proposal, I've gone to that sort of top level planner, and the same with architects. But we're working, potentially on quite a substantial project that's at the beginning of our funnel at the moment. We've gone pretty much top end architect, top end planner, top end project manager, everything, because it's the type and complexity and the scale of the project warrants that. When you get down to normal bread and butter stuff, and we're doing duplexes too, it's sort of that mid-range type of consultant or town planner.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense there, Bob. What about, I suppose what I'm hearing from you is around it is important to have the right town planner for what you're needing. There's no point in getting the top end for something you don't need. Yeah, it certainly makes sense that you need to get the town planner you require. I suppose what we're looking for is a town planner that interacts well with councils. So, how do you know that you're getting the right town planner? How do you know who to go to, Bob? How do you know who is the right planner? Do you ring up and say, "Are you a medium town planner? Are you a non-medium town planner?" How do you approach this as a conversation to a
Yeah.
town planner?
Well, that's not so much the criteria, because that would be difficult, as you're suggesting. What we typically want would be a town planner who's had a lot of experience with the council where we got the application. And so we're interested in a town planner. Let's say we were doing a duplex. Not Our town planners, of course, are capable of doing way more than just a duplex. But if there was a town planner that a lot of the duplex developers, or if you like, the townhouse developers as well, that could be the same people, are using in a particular council, then I would approach them, because they're obviously got not only experience in the type of project that we're doing, but they've got a lot of experience with the council. So they would know particularly the council officers. And what can be good if a town planner has a lot of contact with the councils, they can often pick up the phone. So some
Mm.
some council planners, they vary. Look, they vary inside. Some are quite happy to take a call from a private town planner about something. Some might not be, but the planner themselves, the private town planner that we'd engage, would know who they could call. And I've seen the same with engineers. I used to use a very experienced engineer. He knew every engineer in council, and it was a big council. He could jump on the phone anytime, and they had such respect for him. He'd been around forever,
Mm.
that he could talk to them, and he could hop on the phone to the head engineer at the council and say, "Hey, listen, looking at an application, we're not ready to lodge yet, but this and this and this, and this is a little bit different. So I'd be keen to understand what you think about it." And he could do stuff like that.
Mm.
And so some town planners have those connections as well with council, with more, shall I say, the more friendly council people. And so that's how you would do it. We chose a town planner on some of our work because we got to know from other developers, and even looking at development applications that went through council, that they were doing quite a lot of that particular type of development. And so we approached them and asked all the usual questions. How many development applications do you do a year? What sort of range, what type of developments do you do, and so forth. And it became pretty obvious that they were experienced. They did a lot of the types of development we were interested in. They had well connected at council, and so they were. And their fees, look, their fees are fairly similar, as I said before, from what I'm used to paying anywhere. And good or not so good, their fees are about the same. It's more their ability.
Bob, have you noticed since you started developing 40 years ago and what town planners do now, has their role changed at all, or has it remained the same?
Their role hasn't really changed much at all. In the same way, a developer's role. I mean, what I do as a developer now is really exactly what I used to do when I started 40 years ago. But the big changes have been in technology, and it'd be the same for them. I mean, I can remember, and it's not all that long ago. If you wanted to read the planning scheme for a council, you had to buy a hard copy. I can remember. I could be going back 20 years or so. Uh, and I was developing in Brisbane. I had to pay like $900 to get a printed copy of the Brisbane City Council town plan, and you'd have to go through the contents page, work out what you wanted to do. If I wanted to look at a plan of something, I had to go into the council, and they pulled out these huge, big, I don't even know what they're called, B1 plans or whatever, on a rack, and you had to go through these plans. That's how you found out about lots and zonings. That's probably 30 years ago, to be honest. But now, of course, it's all done online. You can either subscribe to a lot of the software where you get information, or some of it's free, some of it you pay for. That's technology. I think it's the same there with a lot of what they do now. Obviously, applications are online now. You don't have to do paper ones and go and lodge them at the counter. And pay your application fee with a cheque. Those days are gone. But I've done all that. I think it's just technology, and technology is sped things up, and it's also organised things better. And it works for everybody, every consultant, every developer. It's just a time saving.
I think what I like
and
what
I'm
you're
sure
saying
it's the
about
same for them.
organise the information too. Like that's probably really important. So Bob, so their role hasn't really changed. Let's talk about them as a person, because I like to talk about people. Have you found that most town planners are a similar type of person, or not? Is it a bit of a everybody, or when you look around, you think actually they're more like this?
Well, I'm not a qualified personality profiler like you are, although I do pick up bits and pieces, obviously.
Yeah, you're pretty
No,
good at it.
look, the town planners you find at council, it's interesting. Council is like a breeding bed for private town planners. A lot of private town planners cut their teeth in council. And so they've gone through, they've got their degree, they've worked with councils, and that's probably a pretty good thing, really. And they've got to work out how councils work and sort of attitudes, how how they have to integrate with elected members and all this sort of thing. And then for whatever reason they've left, and they've often left, I think, because they don't see themselves as being a career town planner in the constraints of a council. Some people do see that, and that's the sort of thing they want. They might want the 9 to 5, the fortnightly pay, the fact that there's a set hierarchy. And I'm not knocking this. I'm just saying that certain personalities probably work with that. And so you can have that sort of personality more than likely, particularly if they've been in council for some time, not sort of on their way out. And then those that either go straight into private enterprise or come from a council into private enterprise, they're generally a bit more, well, they're a bit different. They might be more entrepreneurial, less obstructional. They're slightly different. Notwithstanding that, they still have to want to enjoy urban design and town planning and all those aspects of it. I couldn't do it. My personality would not do it, and so I've never been drawn to do it. So to a degree, yes, there's certain sorts of people that do it, but I think there is a difference between the career town planner and the private one. Quick story. You got time for a quick story?
I've got all the time in the world.
I had an application once in front of council, and the employed person, in other words, the town planner internally who was running the application, wanted to approve it, and it should have been approved. However, at the time, the mayor was up for election, and the big platform for the election between the mayor and his opposition was basically on development. And some people, a noisy minority, the NIMBYs, were against development and people knocking down houses and building, 4 townhouses. And because it became such a hot potato, the whole development thing, the mayor at the time who was up for election went through and had a look at all the applications and told people not to, and told the employees which ones not to approve. I had an application to knock down a house and build 12 one-bedroom studio apartments, which was what he saw as a high-density thing, right? So he told them not to do it. So they're in the process of knocking it back when the council employee who was actually running the file left and took up a job in private enterprise. I found out that immediately and phoned him. This was his first week out of council at a new job. And I congratulated him on his change and said, I'm about to tackle council. Would you like to represent me? Because this guy had all the inside information, all the goss, absolutely everything on this file from the council perspective. And now he's going to represent me on the other side of the table. And I can tell you that was very successful. How weird is that? One moment he's wanting to approve it, but he's under political pressure not to. He leaves, and next thing he's working for me and belting them. So that was funny. I actually enjoyed that.
It probably points out, Bob, that it pays to kind of just keep tabs of what's happening, doesn't it? Know
Yeah,
who's talking to who.
keep
Yeah,
close. Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah, and that's why it's always good to get out and about as a developer and just
Mm,
even cold call people. I cold call people sometimes. It could be a planner, a builder, it could be anybody. Just ask them what's going on in their world. It could be a 5 minute conversation. If occasionally you might catch up for lunch. But even with town planners, they get a bit of goss, a bit of things in the wind, some changes, maybe some things that council are actually allowing through that aren't strictly in adherence with their planning scheme, but they're a bit relaxed about it at the moment. All these
mm.
sorts of things, good goss.
Well, Bob, there, I think we've chewed the fat on town planners enough. I know you've worked with a plethora in your time. I'd like to thank you for joining me from afar. It's sort of weird having you there, not beside me, but anyway, we got it done. We've probably got different colours going on. Who knows? But I thank you for your insights on town planning. And I think what you've pointed out to people is that the initial question is, are all town planners created equally? The answer is no. There are varying reasons that they have varying parts or varying things going on in their town planning. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Job. Anyway, thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in to us. And Bob and I will catch you again next week. Bye for now.